is suicide considered a sin in Christianity, in the Christian worldview, especially in light of what Brittany Maynard did back in November of 2014? Now, obviously, we can't give a full-blown defense against physician-assisted suicide here. I just want to give 3 quick reasons. But I also want to add that my intention in answering this question is not to heap additional condemnation on what Brittany Maynard did. Obviously, what happened was tragic, and of course, it's very sad what happened. But my goal here is simply to answer the question to a Christian who's asking, why do we consider this a sin within the Christian worldview? Now, the first reason that suicide is considered a sin within the Christian worldview is that the Bible teaches that it's wrong to kill innocent human beings, even when that innocent human being is yourself. And so when people ask me, well, what did Brittany Maynard do that was wrong? Well, Brittany Maynard killed an innocent human being. The second thing wrong with suicide from the Christian worldview perspective is that suicide treats human beings as a means to an end rather than an end in themselves. And the best way to understand this distinction is to understand the difference between intrinsic human value and instrumental human value. You see, the Judeo-Christian worldview says that human beings have intrinsic value. In other words, human beings have value in themselves. Their value is inherent in their own existence. And the reason why the Christian worldview teaches that is because the Bible says that human beings are made in the image of God. That's why they're valuable. Now, being made in the image of God means that you have a property that is not degreed. In other words, you can't have more or less of being made in the image of God. You either are made in the image of God or you're not. And of course, then you would be an animal. And so when it comes to having intrinsic value by virtue of being made in God's image, this has some very specific applications as to how it applies to human beings and their value. And the first is this. Obviously, if you're made in the image of God and that's what gives you value, then you can't lose that value if you lose your limbs or your physical abilities or your mental abilities. Nothing will change no matter what happens to you physically, no matter what illness you have. Okay? Now, that's intrinsic value. But our culture is shifting towards more of an instrumental value system as it pertains to human beings. Now, something has instrumental value if it's a means to an end. In other words, it doesn't have value in itself. It's only valuable because it can get you something else that has value. So, for example, if I had a sparkler and I bought it for $2, you might ask, well, how much is that sparkler worth? Well, it's worth $2. Why? Because it can get me something else that has value, and that is joy, pleasure, and fun. Okay? So now let's suppose then I light the sparkler, it burns, and now I have just a burnt metal piece of a stick. And you might ask, well, then now how much is that sparkler's worth? Well, it's worth nothing. And the reason why is because that sparkler has lost its ability to get me that thing, that other thing, and that is fun, pleasure, or joy. And so notice, when something that has instrumental value loses its ability to get me that other thing, that thing is valueless, and then we can throw it away. Now, the problem is the culture now is adopting instrumental value when it comes to human beings. And they no longer see human beings as having intrinsic value, but rather they are only valuable because they can do something else that has value, or they can get you something else that has value. And so human beings then are valuable because they can work, or contribute to society, or they can raise children, or create art. And the moment that a human being starts to lose their ability to do those things is the precise moment that human beings lose their value. And then they can be also thrown away, just like that sparkler. Now, Brittany Maynard talked about her quality of life. And whenever you hear the phrase quality of life, you know that a person is now talking about an instrumental value system. Because notice, with quality of life, this is a degreed property. It's not like being made in the image of God, which you either are or you're not. But quality of life is something that you can have more of or less of. And so people in their mind have this sort of threshold. And so as your quality of life decreases and drops below the threshold, now all of a sudden your life is not worth living in your mind. And so, of course, that's when people often decide that, okay, either I can take my own life, or it might be permissible to take that person's life, if in the case of euthanasia. But that's the downside, or that's the liability of placing instrumental value on human beings, because the quality of life can drop below a certain level, rendering that person valueless. And so when people ask me, well, what did Brittany Maynard do that was wrong? The second thing that she did was wrong was she declared God's image-bearing value as worthless. She said that there is a human being out there that although they are made in the image of God, was not valuable. And of course, this is an offense to God. The third thing that's wrong with suicide is that it violates our duty to the community. You see, human beings are not atomistic individuals. We're not islands completely separate and distinct from other human beings and have no sort of interaction with them. Rather, human beings live in community. And so therefore, our actions impact the lives of other people. So what did Brittany Maynard do that was wrong with regards to this particular concern? Well, Brittany Maynard didn't tell the truth about how we are supposed to live in the face of difficulty. You see, she sent a message to her community, and indeed all of the nation, because this became a national topic, that when it comes to difficulty, it's okay to run from that difficulty, from that adversity. We are not necessarily obligated to face these challenging life situations, but rather make difficult life problems just go away. And of course, that doesn't teach us how to live well, nor does it teach us how to live in the face of adversity. And of course, it certainly doesn't leave us with a morally helpful memory of Brittany Maynard after she's since passed away. So the three main concerns with suicide in light of the Christian worldview is that, first of all, suicide kills an innocent human being. Number two, it declares God's image-bearing value as worthless. And three, it violates our duty to the community by saying that we can actually simply run from adversity rather than face it.